Should audio reviewers be an audiophile or an audio enthusiast? Here is my perspective on what it is to be an audiophile and whether or not a reviewer should be one. You can ask 10 people to define in their own words an audiophile and you'll get 10 different answers. Snob, rich, nerd, gifted hearing, snake oil, audiophile, elitist, eccentric, loony, doesn't exist, etc. In my own words, an audiophile is someone who seeks an accurate reproduction of real-life instruments and vocals on audio gear within their budget. Yes, there are audiophiles in all budget sizes. There's a lot more than just money spent that goes into being an audiophile. It isn't complicated. Let's be clear, there is a difference between an audio enthusiast and an audiophile. An audio enthusiast is someone who enjoys music and gear, desiring to get the most enjoyment out of each listening moment, obsessing about the specs and capabilities, dissecting the gear, not the music, searching for that next wow moment, product, or song. An audiophile is someone who seeks an accurate reproduction of real-life instruments and vocals, enjoys critiquing each listening moment, dissecting the music through the gear, listening for naturalism and realism. There's nothing wrong with being one or the other, or a hybrid of both. There are a lot of similarities, but a few differences that set each apart. One focuses more on gear, measurements, graphs, and specs. The other focuses more on the music, instruments, vocals, and reproduction. Understanding what an audiophile is listening for can help explain the gear and sources that they use and desire. There are all sorts of gear available, and it can be hard to figure out what you are getting sonically. But you won't know what to purchase if you don't know what you want and why. One of the biggest misconceptions of audiophilia is that in order to be considered an audiophile, you have to be rich. It is often thought that audiophiles believe that all cheap gear under $1,000 sounds like hot garbage. And on the flip side, audio enthusiasts think that gear over $1,000 is just insanely crazy. That is totally false. Gear is only a small aspect of audiophilia. Gear helps you to discover the details and sonics that you are seeking, but you don't need mega dollar gear to be an audiophile. There are all sorts of budgets, and audiophiles exist throughout the varying budget ranges. Another misconception is that an audiophile only uses vinyl and speakers. There are all sorts of gear avenues to explore in the audiophile community, and there are audiophiles in each one of them. Back in the day, when the definition for audiophiles was introduced, there weren't very many, if any, headphones, so speakers were the norm. But an audiophile is seeking an accurate reproduction of real-life instruments and vocals, enjoys critiquing each listening session, dissecting the music through the gear, listening for naturalism and realism, and that can be done on any sort of gear: speakers, IEMs, headphones, soundbars, Bluetooth, DAPs, you name it. Misconception also is that in audiophilia, the specs are chased by both an enthusiast and an audiophile. An audiophile is not concerned with all the specs until they are blue in the face. An audiophile is concerned with the quality of reproduction until they are blue in the face. An audiophile uses specs as a guide to know whether or not gear is compatible, but they do not obsess over whether or not everything matches 100% measurements accurate. An audiophile is more concerned with sonic synergy among gear and what ultimately reproduces the best music to their ears. Speaking of chasing specs, another misconception is that there is no place for subjectivity in audiophilia. Audio enthusiasts are more objective than audiophiles, who tend to be more subjective. An audiophile is subjective when selecting gear to pair or what music sounds best. They do not focus on the gear measurements and graphs to dictate what they are hearing, but instead they use their ears to tell them what they hear actually sounds like. Another misconception is that gear doesn't sound any different than what the graph and measurement says, or that graphs will dictate how gear will present the tone, timbre, detail retrieval, and resolution. Audio enthusiasts tend to believe this concept that graphs and measurements will tell you how gear will sound. An audiophile would tell you that this isn't the case more often than not. Just because something measures neutral doesn't mean it will sound neutral to your ears. Another misconception is that audiophiles only listen to classical, jazz, and instrumental music. This one cracks me up. Yes, most audiophiles enjoy and listen to classical, jazz, and instrumental music, but it's not the only genres in their music library. Audiophiles have all sorts of music genres that they listen to, whether it be oldies, classic rock, metal, hard rock, country, new age, blues, pop, dance, electronic, everything else in between. An audiophile listens to a lot of classical, jazz, and instrumental genres because those genres often have the most natural, accurate, and realistic reproduction of instruments and vocals. Another misconception is that audiophiles dislike bass and they're all treble heads, and that all audio enthusiasts are bass heads and dislike treble. Come on, really? The difference is that audiophiles enjoy bass and treble that is detailed accurately and reproduced realistically. Audio enthusiasts enjoy bass that is powerful and authoritative, but not as detailed accurately and not reproduced realistically, and treble that is boosted to add in details and air in an unnatural way. A boosted bass that is controlled, detailed, and resolving will not bleed into the mids. But a lot of times, mid and upper bass can bleed into the mids because they aren't reproduced accurately. When upper bass and lower mids are done accurately, there is an increase in note weight and density, but that is not the same as bloat and bleed. Another misconception is that a raised and extended treble increases details, resolution, soundstage width, and depth. Yeah, this is not correct. Most of the time, by boosting the treble, this gives a false sense of details, resolution, soundstage width, and depth. Just because something has rolled off treble doesn't mean that it will lack details, resolution, sparkle, energy, or air. Details and resolution are found in all of the frequency ranges. A lot of times, a slightly rolled off treble gives the most natural and accurate presentation. Another erroneous thought is that a wider soundstage provides a more natural and accurate separation of instruments and vocals. Soundstage is another area that walks a fine line between too much and the right amount. A lot of times, soundstage is extended too far to give the separation and depth, but it isn't naturally accurate, even though it sounds awesome. Often what is heard by our ears in the real world is overlooked and disregarded for that large, deep, separated stage because of the enjoyment. But in reality, it isn't natural or accurate. An audiophile seeks to reproduce the most accurate and realistic soundstage that matches up with the outside world, and that doesn't necessarily include every little detail and have super wide separation. Another false narrative is that for an audiophile, every little detail and the best resolution has to be revealed to be the best product. When listening to the real world with your own ears, you do not hear every little detail, and resolution is not always the best. Because there are distortions and imperfections that exist all around us. An audiophile is seeking an accurate, natural, and realistic reproduction of the sounds, so they don't desire to hear every little detail, and the resolution doesn't always need to be the best. Another aspect of an audiophile is that they seek natural and realistic tone and timbre. This is very true. An audiophile uses their own life experiences from hearing or playing instruments and vocalists to translate that to what they are seeking in the gear and music, so that they can match that with the accuracy, natural, and realistic reproduction. Now, how does all this apply to reviewers? To understand a review fully, you need to know where the reviewer stands as an audiophile or an audio enthusiast. Get to know your reviewer and how they define sounds and why they believe what they believe. A reviewer needs to be open and honest about the terms and definitions that they use and why. By doing this, the reviewers by doing this, the viewers and readers will learn how to interpret the reviews. Going forward with time, the reviewer's audience will understand the perspectives and approach instead of being confused and frustrated by the reviewer's use of undefined terms and definitions. A reviewer should share what gear they use on a regular basis and why. This will help the audience to compare with their own experiences so that they better understand what the reviewer is hearing and why. If the reviewer is constantly using different gear and not telling the audience what gear is being used, then they will be confused and must misunderstand the review. Reviewers should define what they are seeking and/or preferences and why. This is the easiest and best way to let the audience know whether or not they are an audiophile or an audio enthusiast. A reviewer giving their definitions of an audiophile or an audio enthusiast will help the audience to understand the approaches and perspectives of the reviews. Reviewers should share what music they use for reviewing purposes and what they listen to on a regular basis for enjoyment. This doesn't necessarily have to be done in the actual review, but it can be links in the description, randomly mentioning and sharing music preferences on forums, servers, or live streams. And this will help the audience to connect with the reviewer. Getting to know what type of music the reviewer uses and enjoys helps the audience to explore different genres and also opens the avenue to hear what the reviewer hears on gear pairings. Reviewers should state whether or not they use streaming services, what services, network streamers, and music management programs, and why. This will help the audience to relate to the reviewer with commonalities and preferences. Reviewers should share how they relate to the music and gear and how it interacts with their personal life in the past or present. Doing this adds a personal touch to the review and will help the audience understand the reviewer on a more intimate level. Focusing more on relating and communicating with their audience than growing the subscriber count will ultimately grow the reviewer's audience's respect and loyalty. Reviewers should focus more on accurate sonic impressions and comparisons than picture and video quality. In conclusion, these are just my random thoughts about what an audiophile and an audio enthusiast are seeking and whether or not a reviewer should be an audiophile. I haven't done any scientific research or polls. I am just basing my conclusions off of my personal experiences and observations. I believe a reviewer can be either an audiophile or an audio enthusiast, but a reviewer should be honest and open with their audience about whether or not they are an audiophile or an audio enthusiast. If a reviewer cannot honestly and openly answer the question, are you an audiophile or an audio enthusiast and why, that should be a red flag. I am an audiophile. I am pursuing an accurate, natural, and realistic reproduction of instruments and vocals. So ask yourself, am I an audiophile, audio enthusiast, or a little bit of both? Next, ask yourself, is my favorite reviewer an audiophile, an audio enthusiast, or a little bit of both? And then thirdly, why did I answer that way to both of those questions? I am Dave, the Honest Audiophile. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. If not, I understand if you have to give it a thumbs down. Please comment, subscribe, and don't forget to hit that notification bell. Also, check out the links for the gear ranking tier list down below. Also, there's music links, gear recommendations, affiliate links, and all sorts of other information down below. Remember, enjoy the music, and honesty is the best policy. Thanks for watching. Have yourself a great day, and I will catch you on the next video.